Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The First Lady of New York Radio, Joan Hamburg. Entertaining and informative. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Welcome, everyone. Joan Hamburg, and I'm happy to have you with us today. I want you to meet an old friend of mine. I first met Jill Brook when she was covering our industry for the New York Post. And Jill was a former CNN correspondent, editor-in-chief of Avenue and Travel Savvy magazine. She's written articles, books, editorial director of FPD, and I'm going to let Jill explain, flowerpowerdaily.com. And she's also the floral editor for Aspire Design and Home Magazine, and contributes to so many different things, including Flower Review. So I want you to meet Jill because we're at a very unusual time when it comes to flowers, and Flowers for Peace is suddenly becoming a worldwide movement, or maybe it's always been involved, and we just haven't paid enough attention. Thank you, Jill, and you're in an amazing industry at an amazing time.
Well, you want to know what? Flowers have always planted a seed for possibility throughout history. And what we're seeing right now especially is how the sunflower has become a symbol of hope and connects everyone to the Ukraine. And the reason is that it's their national flower. But what most people don't realize about the sunflower, which is one of those flowers that symbolize hope throughout history, but what we don't realize about this particular movement is that the sunflower became the Ukrainian national flower because of North America, because of us. Because in the 1980s, somebody from the Ukraine brought some seeds back to the Ukraine. And because of the Orthodox Church during Lent banning butter, they started using sunflower oil to cook. And they loved the flowers, they loved the sunflower oil, and it took off. Fields of sunflowers, dominated the landscape of the Ukraine. It became a cultural flower for them. And now they were, prior to this horrible war, though that it is a David and Goliath story, that it was the largest producer of sunflower seeds and oil.
Right. Who
knew? And what you're also seeing is people wanting to connect, to show support all across the world. And what we've been doing at Flower Power Daily is floral artists around the country and world have been sending us these beautiful, beautiful pieces of art and floral artistry. And not only that, you're also seeing it like with Jill Biden wearing a sunflower right now, if you noticed and Saturday Night Live when, they opened up with a sea of flowers. And flowers have always had great symbolism and relevance, especially for political movements. And not only for the Ukraine, but guess what? Even for the right to vote in the United States. Does that surprise you?
Yeah. Tell me what that means.
Well, during 1920, Tennessee was the last state to ratify the women's vote, and it was essential. And as you can imagine, because you see where Congress is right now, it was a brawl. So the supporters of the right to vote for women wore yellow roses because yellow stood for hope, and the opponents wore red roses. So as soon as somebody would support women, they would get a yellow rose put on their lapel. And there was this man, representative named Byrne, who was like the vote. And he initially came in wearing a red rose, and it almost wasn't going to be ratified, the right for a woman to vote. But then his mother sent him a note, And she was a voracious reader and, implored him, this is really important and fair. I'm really hoping that you're going to vote to ratify it. And sure enough, because of that letter from his mama coming in to, that he read, he changed his vote, and the right for women to vote got ratified. And you can imagine that it caused a lot of problems initially for him because he was like a freshman congressman. And nonetheless, he did the right thing and didn't mind, the pushback. And then later on, of course, is a hero to Tennessee and basically to all women, all because of how do you show symbolism. And that is what is carried in a flower often throughout history. There's another example, which I'm sure when you see the hybrid roses, that was from the 15th century when you heard the War of the Roses. Well,
right.
That phrase actually comes from, back in England, and it was the Lancaster and York, fighting, and the way that they made peace, because one wore red and one wore white, is they created a hybrid of red and white to say that we can agree to disagree, but we must get along for our survival. And, people don't realize how flowers have been such a symbol throughout history. And now the reason that you see so many hybrid roses in English weddings is back from that particular moment of time.
Wow. And because we are watching this horrible situation on television, many of you may have noticed that even some of the women soldiers are wearing sunflowers in their hair and wearing scarves or whatever they can around what their uniforms are in blue and yellow. So
yes.
More than ever, right? They're so relevant.
Well, they are so relevant because, they immediately are symbolic, and it creates motivation and hope. And if you think about it, and this is part of the reason I started Flower Power Daily, because we look at how flowers intersect in news stories, pop culture, art, design, food, wellness. Flowers have raised in importance at this moment of time, maybe because of the pandemic. But, as somebody who dives deep into history and loves history like I do, you realize that flowers are one of the only entities, Joan, that convey both comfort and celebration. And they're really baked into its DNA is so much symbolism, and not only that, relevance. And you see it every day. Like most people don't know this, that even during Martin Luther King, when he did his march in Selma with John Lewis, well, what happened is that they had many other, marches that, as we know, did not go well, as history knows. But he had this idea that if I wear a Hawaiian lei and you see all these people going down and marching with flowers, they won't appear menacing. And it's so interesting how so few people ever report on this particular detail, which, of course, I love, running Flower Power Daily. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, his most successful march that turned the tide of history was when he was wearing those Hawaiian leis walking down.
And there was a story that I read, I don't remember if you said it, but about a Ukrainian woman who was giving seeds, sunflower seeds, to the Russian soldiers. And yes. She said, take these seeds because when you die, they're going to grow. And everyone sort of picked up on this story.
Well,
was that true?
Yes, it was absolutely true. Because, again, sunflower seeds, and sunflowers are so iconic for the Ukrainian people. And what she was basically saying is that no matter what you do, I hope when you die, when our soldiers for this good cause, knock you down eventually, the seeds will be there. So something so awful that has happened in our land will regrow. And by the way, that's very symbolic to something else that most people don't know about the poppy. Now, we know how the red poppy, for instance, is literally always attached to the military remembrance, right? We always see, even in England, with, the poppy is, such an iconic flower. But there's a reason for it. back in the day when Napoleon raised Europe and all these poor boys didn't have a proper burial, for whatever reason, mysteriously, whatever happened underneath the earth, poppies started growing. And the poppy, which represented obviously the red color, which is blood, the black is darkness, but then the flower represented hope. And for whatever reason, by it growing and that image, it just gave people hope for the future. Now, what often happens with any good movement is that lots of different things have to occur simultaneously, and that's a bit of luck and a bit of destiny. But nonetheless, we can look back and, cobble together in a Surah type of way a beautiful story. And it turns out that in World War I, the same thing happened. During, World War I, and you always hear about Flanders Field, that famous poem. Well, that same thing happened when, the soldiers got killed, poppies grew up, and the soldier actually had written about, looking at his friend like the poppy, and who had unfortunately been killed. And he actually had, crinkled up this little thing he wrote and threw it out. And as destiny would have it, one of his comrades picked it up and said, "This is beautiful," sent it to someone, and then it had a ripple effect. And I guess for that version went viral. And sure enough, that's why we now have the poppy for all military remembrances in the United States, in England, in Canada, and elsewhere.
And of course, and now the blue and yellow, the colors, the sunflowers, we have symbols of resilience, of hope, and all things that we need. But I'm curious, Jill, when I first met you, you were covering radio, TV, a lot of media for the Post, and then you went on to be a correspondent at CNN. You've headed a lot of major magazines. Where did flowers come in? I mean, we know women take a lot of chances and change much more easily than guys, but you've done a lot of different changes, all voluntarily. And I was curious when we heard that you were going into this business.
Well, I think that you live life in chapters. And, when you are a sensitive soul like I am, and maybe a little overly sensitive, we all need something in our toolbox that just immediately gives us comfort. And for me, that has always been flowers. And I think that, other people do different things. So even throughout my whole entire life, I have always loved flowers and the beauty that they bring to my life. And I think also what you realize, more importantly, is that when you live life in chapters, one of the things that really bothers me whenever you see all these business people and they always go, "Oh, just do it, just do it." Well, I was raising a family and I needed a paycheck. And when you have to go out on your own, it requires expense. It also requires what I call a mistake fund, because you think you're doing the right things, and then all of a sudden you get ripped off here and there. And, it requires the opportunity. And I have always loved flowers and dreamt about doing this, but it wasn't until my post-50s that I even had the opportunity to do it. And, it means making a lot of sacrifices. And therefore, this was the right time to plant these seeds of possibility. And I think that, for your audience out there, to just have faith that you really do live life in chapters. And it depends what your measuring stick is. It has to be different things at different times. And I just said, well, if not now, when? And luckily, people really responded so well, because flowers do give comfort and they do inspire. And my journalistic background has allowed me to enter a field that nobody had looked at in the way that I do, because I'm a history buff. I have an art history degree. So we're looking at it in a very different way, and we get to showcase the most gorgeous photography from around the world that just makes people happy. So the goal here is to give people a burst of positivity and beauty every day. And as I always say, flowers are a universal kiss to remind us that solace and beauty exist. And That is exactly what flowers do for everyone. And around the globe, Joan, no matter what socioeconomic group you go to, no matter what person you speak to, everybody has the same response to flowers. And it just makes you stop and recognize that there is beauty in the world. And I want to spend the rest of my life now pursuing that and just giving people beauty and joy, and as well as wisdom through flowers.
Right. And hope, which we need more than ever.
Yes, more than ever.
Well, I thank you so much, Jill Brook. And you can go on to Jill's website, flowerpowerdaily.com, and become involved. And like Jill, I love flowers. I always have them in my house. I have lovely gardens that I've worked on forever, but I can't bear to cut the flowers.
Well, what do you grow in your garden?
I have
to start thinking of spring flowers.
Yeah, well, I have a wet garden because there's a lot of water on the property, and that's a whole different one. And I have a cutting garden, but I go out and I look at the whole range of wonderful flowers, and I think, you know what? I'm going to leave them where they are and just enjoy them. So flowers are part of so many of our lives, and right now, it's the sunflower that's tying us all to the Ukrainian people, and
Absolutely.
A very special.
And, it's a fall flower usually, but now, there's a different demand, and, it's just a symbolism also of yellow and blue. But don't forget that zinnias and dahlias, after you cut them, they grow back more. And in a way, because flowers are so seasonal, it teaches us about the cycle of life. It teaches us also to have patience, which most of us didn't do. And one of the benefits, I think, of the pandemic is it pressed the pause button and made people have a little bit more perspective and recognize their priorities. And so what happens with that is that that, for instance, spring flowers are like the daffodils. And then in June, you have the peonies. And there's a reason for that, because flowers teach us lessons every single day about life. And that's what I love writing about.
I thank you so much. Continued success, Jill Brook. And I look forward to talking to you again. All the best to you and your family.
Thank you so much, Joni.
You're welcome, Jill. And you're all listening to WABC, and there's lots more ahead, so stay right here.